Welcome to the state of Wisconsin, where we explore the crimes and sentencing of Antonio Barbeau, a 14-year-old boy who committed an unimaginable act of violence against his own great-grandmother. Prepare to be shocked as we delve into the details of this horrific crime that shook a small town in Wisconsin. The 14-year-old was charged with first-degree intentional homicide for allegedly bludgeoning 78-year-old Barbara Olson, who happens to be his great-grandmother, at her Sheboygan Falls home with a hammer and hatchet. To understand the shocking crimes committed by Antonio Barbeau, we must first delve into his troubled past and the factors that led to his unimaginable act of violence against his own great-grandmother. Antonio Barbeau was no stranger to a troubled upbringing. Born into a broken home, he faced a childhood marred by instability and neglect. His parents, struggling with their own demons, were unable to provide him with the love and support that every child deserves. As a result, Barbeau grew up in a chaotic environment, devoid of stability and structure. From an early age, Barbeau exhibited signs of anger and aggression. His teachers and classmates often witnessed his violent outbursts, which were met with little intervention or guidance from the adults in his life. As he entered his teenage years, his behavior escalated, and he became increasingly difficult to control. It was during this tumultuous period that Barbeau's great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, stepped in to provide him with a sense of stability. Recognizing the troubled state of her great-grandson, Olson took him into her home, hoping to offer him the love and guidance he so desperately needed. Olson, a kind-hearted and patient woman, did her best to provide a nurturing environment for Barbeau. She believed that with her support, he could overcome his troubled past and find a path towards a better future. However, despite her best efforts, Barbeau's anger and aggression continued to simmer beneath the surface. As time went on, tensions between Barbeau and his great-grandmother began to rise. The weight of his troubled past and the lack of proper intervention took its toll on the young boy. He struggled to control his emotions, often lashing out at those closest to him, including Olson. The motive behind Barbeau's heinous crime can be traced back to a combination of factors. Firstly, his troubled upbringing left him with deep-seated anger and resentment towards those who had failed him. He harbored a sense of abandonment and sought to inflict the pain he had experienced onto others. Secondly, Barbeau's mental health played a significant role in his actions. The lack of proper intervention and support for his emotional struggles left him feeling isolated and misunderstood. His anger and aggression were manifestations of his internal turmoil, and he saw his great-grandmother as a convenient target for his pent-up rage. Lastly, the influence of external factors cannot be ignored. In today's society, where violence is often glorified and sensationalized, Barbeau was exposed to a constant barrage of negative influences. From violent video games to graphic movies, he was immersed in a culture that normalized aggression and desensitized him to the consequences of his actions. On that fateful day, as tensions reached a boiling point, Barbeau's anger and frustration overwhelmed him. In a moment of sheer rage, he made the fateful decision to take a hatchet from the garage and confront his great-grandmother in the living room. The events that unfolded next were nothing short of horrifying. Barbeau, consumed by his anger and fueled by a distorted sense of justice, unleashed a brutal attack on Olson. The sound of the hatchet striking her frail body echoed through the walls, leaving a scene of unimaginable carnage in its wake. He then ran to the bathroom as he was feeling sick, but when he emerged, he saw his partner hit the woman with the hammer multiple times.
She knew I was on the run, and she said she was going to call my mom.
What happened next?
We got in, and then I looked to Nate and nodded and shook my head as in yes or no. He nodded, and then I took the first swing.
Okay, and when you say that you took the first swing, is with the hand axe?
Yes, sir.
Neighbors, alerted by the commotion, called the police, who arrived at the scene to find a blood-soaked living room and a lifeless body. Barbeau, still in a state of shock, was arrested and taken into custody. The community was left in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the brutality of the crime committed by a 14-year-old boy. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the motive behind Barbeau's actions became clearer. It was a culmination of his troubled past, his untreated mental health issues, and the toxic influences of the world around him. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions: grief, anger, and a sense of disbelief. The brutal crime committed by Antonio Barbeau sent shockwaves through the community, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. As the news of the horrific murder of his great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, spread, the tight-knit town of Wisconsin was left reeling, struggling to come to terms with the unimaginable act of violence perpetrated by a 14-year-old boy.
We were going to try to scare her to get money and then use force if needed.
Okay. And when you say use force if needed, was there a discussion about what type of force you might use?
An attack, I guess guess, to kill.
In the aftermath of the crime, the community rallied together to support the grieving family and seek justice for Olson. The sense of shock and disbelief was palpable as neighbors and friends grappled with the realization that such darkness could exist within their midst. As the legal proceedings began, the courtroom became a stage for the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented a compelling case, meticulously piecing together the evidence that pointed to Barbeau's guilt. They painted a picture of a troubled young boy with a history of violent outbursts and a lack of remorse for his actions. It was also revealed that he and his partner literally took turns hitting his grandmother.
She started heading into the living room, falling.
And as she was falling, were there any more blows? Did you strike her again?
I hit one more time as she was falling.
At any point, did you not have the hand axe during this incident?
Right after that, Nate took it and he used it, the blade side of it.
The defense, on the other hand, sought to humanize Barbeau, shedding light on his troubled past and the failures of the system to intervene and provide the necessary support. They argued that a life sentence would be too harsh for a young boy who had experienced such trauma and urged the court to consider rehabilitation as a viable alternative. As the trial progressed, chilling details of the crime emerged. The prosecution presented evidence showing the premeditation and intent behind Barbeau's actions. They revealed that he had carefully planned the attack on his great-grandmother, fueled by a deep-seated anger and a distorted sense of justice. Grocery store surveillance footage also showed both boys picking up gloves and wipes, which Barbeau stated were used to wipe fingerprints. Throughout the trial, Barbeau sat in the courtroom, a haunting presence. His eyes, filled with a mix of fear and defiance, betrayed the inner turmoil he was experiencing. At times, he sobbed uncontrollably, seemingly overwhelmed by the gravity of his actions. Other times, he appeared detached, as if disconnected from the reality unfolding around him. He displayed a wide range of emotions in the trial, from wiping tears from his eyes to smirking at the prosecutor. The judge presiding over the case was faced with the difficult task of balancing justice with compassion. He acknowledged the shocking nature of the crime and the devastating impact it had on the victim's family. He broke down in tears when he was sentenced and tried to read an apologetic statement to the court. With tears in his eyes, he couldn't even complete the statement.
No, I don't show my emotions much, and I myself am not sure why. But that doesn't mean I don't.
He pleaded no contest and was sentenced to spend at least 36 years in jail over the murder, making him eligible for parole when he is 50 years old. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, relief, grief, and a sense of closure. The family of Barbara Olson, though grateful for the verdict, knew that no sentence could bring back their beloved matriarch. They were left to grapple with the pain and loss caused by the actions of their flesh and blood. As the news of the sentencing spread, it ignited a broader conversation about the failures of the system to intervene and prevent such a horrific act. Questions were raised about the role of mental health support, the availability of resources for troubled youth, and the need for early intervention to address behavioral issues. The case of Antonio Barbeau served as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within even the youngest members of society. It highlighted the importance of recognizing the warning signs and providing the necessary support to those in need. It also underscored the need for a justice system that balances punishment with rehabilitation, particularly for young offenders. The shocking crimes committed by Antonio Barbeau against his great-grandmother, Barbara Olson, left a lasting impact on the community and raised important questions about the broader implications of such tragic events. As we reflect on this harrowing case, there are valuable lessons to be learned and steps that can be taken to prevent similar tragedies in the future. We're in the state of Iowa. This is 22-year-old former Iowa college student Alexander Jackson. He has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for fatally executing his father, mother, and sister in their Northeast Cedar Rapids home. On that fateful day in June 2021, Alex Jackson committed an unspeakable act, taking the lives of his own parents and sister in a brutal and calculated manner. The details of this case are both horrifying and perplexing, leaving many questions unanswered. Let's delve into the events that led up to that fateful day in June 2021. It was a path marked by tension, strained relationships, and a growing sense of desperation. Alex Jackson, a 22-year-old man, had been living with his parents, Jan and Melissa Jackson, and his younger sister, Sabrina, in their family home in Northeast Cedar Rapids. But behind closed doors, the family dynamic was far from harmonious. Jan Jackson, a 61-year-old man, had been growing increasingly frustrated with his son's lack of direction and motivation. He had repeatedly urged Alex to find a job or make plans for his future, With only $30 in his bank account, Alex's financial situation was dire, and the pressure from his father only intensified his feelings of inadequacy. The strained relationship between father and son reached a breaking point. Jan made it clear to Alex that he needed to either find employment or move out of the family home. This ultimatum left Alex feeling trapped and desperate, with seemingly no way out. As the days passed, the tension within the Jackson household continued to mount. Alex's frustration and resentment towards his family grew, fueling a sense of anger and hopelessness. The weight of his perceived failures and the pressure to meet his father's expectations became unbearable. On the surface, the Jackson family appeared to be like any other, but beneath the facade, a storm was brewing. The mounting pressure, financial strain, and strained relationships created a toxic environment that would ultimately lead to a devastating outcome. It was on the morning of June 15th, 2021, that the unthinkable occurred. In a premeditated act of violence, Alex Jackson took the lives of his parents and sister in a brutal and calculated manner. Armed with a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, he unleashed a wave of gunfire that would forever change the lives of those involved and send shockwaves through the community. The details of that tragic day are chilling. Alex methodically shot his family members multiple times, leaving them dead in their own home. The violence and brutality of the act were shocking, leaving investigators and the community in disbelief. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found no signs of forced entry or any indication of an intruder. The murder weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, was recovered, with Alex's palm prints clearly visible. It became increasingly clear that the alleged intruder Alex had described in his 911 call was nothing more than a fabrication, an attempt to deflect blame from himself. As the investigation unfolded, the true horror of the situation became apparent. Jan Jackson was found in the lower level of the house, his body riddled with 5 gunshot wounds. Melissa Jackson was discovered in the master bedroom with 3 gunshot wounds, and Sabrina, just 19 years old, was found in her lower level bedroom, adjacent to Alex's room, with 2 gunshot injuries. The medical examiner's report revealed the extent of the violence inflicted upon the victims. Each family member had died from multiple gunshot wounds, with Melissa Jackson suffering a close-range shot to the eye, a detail that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. In the aftermath of the killings, Alex Jackson made a 911 call, claiming that an intruder had broken into the house and shot him in the foot, as well as another family member. But the evidence at the scene told a different story. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was stolen or disturbed in the home. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, painting a picture of a disturbed young man driven to commit an unimaginable act of violence against his own family. As the investigation continued, Alex was interviewed by the police while receiving treatment for the gunshot wound to his foot. Despite overwhelming evidence pointing to his guilt, he continued to deny any involvement in the murders, placing the blame squarely on the alleged intruder. The trial that followed would shed further light on the events leading up to the crime and the motives behind Alex's actions. The prosecution argued that the strained relationship between father and son, coupled with financial pressures and a sense of desperation, provided a motive for the killings. However, the defense maintained that there was a lack of physical evidence and questioned the prosecution's ability to establish a clear motive, guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions as the reality of the situation sank in. Alex Jackson, once a member of a seemingly ordinary family, was now a convicted murderer. The trial took place at the Lynn County Courthouse in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where Alexander Jackson, now a convicted murderer, stood before the court to face the consequences of his actions. The prosecution, led by First Assistant Lynn County Attorney Monica Slaughter and Assistant Lynn County Attorney Jordan Shear, presented a compelling case against Jackson, aiming to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution's case heavily relied on the evidence collected from the crime scene. Brandon Bosenberg, a former Cedar Rapids crime scene investigator, played a crucial role in gathering the vital pieces of evidence that would link Jackson to the murders. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was the discovery of Jackson's palm prints on the .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle used in the killings. This damning evidence left little room for doubt regarding Jackson's involvement.
Him going to the extent of shooting himself in the foot in an attempt to blame these murders on and I will say it again, phantom burglar who did not exist in this case.
In addition to the physical evidence, the prosecution also presented video evidence from Ring doorbell cameras. The footage showed no signs of an intruder entering or leaving the Jackson home at the time of the murders, further undermining Jackson's claims of an unknown assailant. The absence of forced entry or any signs of a struggle within the house further strengthened the prosecution's case, pointing to Jackson as the sole perpetrator.
Deaths of each of the decedents in this case were caused by multiple gunshot wounds. Each of those gunshot wounds fired from different distances. There was evidence in the record that the shots were fired from a distance, and then each of the decedents was shot up close and personal to ensure the death of the victims in this case, Jan, Melissa, and Sabrina Jackson.
As the trial progressed, the courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions. Family members of the victims, including Jan's sister Kay Jackson and her daughter Danielle Jackson Parsons, were present throughout the proceedings, seeking closure and justice for their loved ones. The pain and grief they experienced were palpable, a constant reminder of the devastating loss they had endured. Throughout the trial, the defense, led by Jackson's lawyers Lindsey Garner and Tyler Johnston, attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. They argued that the lack of physical evidence and a clear motive should raise questions about Jackson's guilt. Johnston emphasized that there was not a shred of evidence that disproves Jackson's version of events, suggesting that the jury should consider the possibility of an alternative explanation. However, the prosecution countered these arguments by highlighting the strained relationship between Jackson and his family. Jan Jackson's insistence that his son find a job or move out, coupled with Alex's dire financial situation, provided a motive for the killings. Because of what they described as the heinous and brutal nature of the murders, prosecutors asked Judge Anderson to impose the life sentences consecutively.
The nature and circumstances of each separate offense in this matter were abhorrent. The heinous, brutal nature of each of these homicides warrants the court imposing 3 consecutive life sentences.
The state asked for Jackson to serve 3 life sentences to be run consecutively without the possibility of parole. He was also made to pay $450,000 in restitution. He showed absolutely no reaction when the verdict was read. Finally, we're in New Mexico for the arraignment of 15-year-old Nehemiah Grigo, who shot and killed his entire family in cold blood. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of child abuse resulting in death. In January 2013, the South Valley community in New Mexico was rocked by a devastating mass shooting that claimed the lives of 5 members of the Grigo family. Nehemiah Grigo, the 15-year-old eldest son, was arrested and charged with these heinous acts. This tragic event sent shockwaves through the nation and raised important questions about the nature of the crimes and the appropriate punishment for a minor offender. On a cold January night in 2013, the Grigo family's peaceful home in South Valley, New Mexico, became the backdrop for a horrifying tragedy. The Grigo family consisted of Greg and Sarah Grigo, devoted parents to their 9 children and pillars of their community. However, their seemingly idyllic life would soon be shattered by the actions of their own son, Nehemiah Grigo. It was around midnight when Nehemiah, then just 15 years old, embarked on a path of unimaginable violence. Armed with a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, he crept into his parents' bedroom and took aim at his mother, Sarah. The sound of the gunshot shattered the silence of the night, forever altering the lives of the Grigo family. Awakened by the noise, Nehemiah's younger brother Zephaniah stumbled into the room, unaware of the horror that awaited him. Nehemiah callously informed Zephaniah that he had just shot their mother, a revelation that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Without hesitation, Nehemiah turned the gun on his brother, ending his young life in an instant. The chilling echoes of gunshots reverberated through the Grigo household, reaching the ears of Nehemiah's 2 younger sisters, Jael and Angelina. As Nehemiah entered their shared bedroom, he was met with the heart-wrenching sight of his sisters crying in fear and confusion. In a cold and calculated act, he aimed his weapon at each of them, extinguishing their innocent lives with a single pull of the trigger. With his family members lying lifeless in their home, Nehemiah descended the stairs, his mind consumed by a darkness that few could comprehend. He patiently waited for his father, Greg, to return from his shift at a homeless shelter, knowing that his father's arrival would mark the final chapter of this horrific tale. As the first rays of dawn began to break, Greg Grigo returned home, unknowingly stepping into a nightmare. Nehemiah, armed with an AR-15 type semi-automatic rifle equipped with a scope, unleashed a barrage of bullets upon his father. The sound of gunfire shattered the tranquility of the morning, leaving Greg mortally wounded. With his family now dead, Nehemiah embarked on a chilling journey. He loaded the 2 rifles into his van and drove to church, where he encountered his girlfriend. In a chilling display of deception, he informed her that his family had been killed in an accident, concealing the truth of his own monstrous actions. Alarmed by this revelation, the pastor and a retired homicide detective from the congregation made the fateful decision to drive Nehemiah back to the house, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. During the journey, the retired detective's instincts kicked in, sensing that something was amiss. Fearing for their safety, he made the courageous decision to call 911, alerting the authorities to the unfolding tragedy. Little did they know that they were about to uncover a crime that would shock the nation. In the aftermath of the massacre, Nehemiah's account of the events began to shift. He confessed to having suicidal and homicidal thoughts, revealing the dark depths of his troubled mind. Nehemiah admitted to obtaining the firearms used in the crime from his parents' closet, a chilling testament to the ease with which he accessed these deadly weapons. He even went so far as to email a photo of his lifeless mother to his girlfriend, a haunting reminder of the devastation he had wrought. As the community grappled with the enormity of the tragedy, legal proceedings began to unfold. At just 15 years old, Nehemiah was classified as a minor, but the severity of his crimes raised complex questions about the appropriate course of action. Under New Mexico law, minors charged with first-degree murder are typically tried as adults, but they cannot be sentenced to death or life without parole. The case faced numerous complications, and by January 2015, it had reached a standstill. Mental health evaluations of Nehemiah were underway, further adding to the complexity of the legal proceedings. However, in October 2015, a breakthrough occurred when Nehemiah pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of child abuse resulting in death. The sheriff's office revealed that Nehemiah had meticulously planned the killings for days, leaving no doubt about the premeditated nature of his actions. He had been held at the Sequoia Adolescent Treatment Center for the previous 18 months, where his suitability for treatment as a juvenile would be evaluated. Extended family members supported the idea of an amenability hearing, hoping to determine whether Nehemiah could be rehabilitated rather than face a trial.
From our perspective, with Nehemiah being in segregated confinement for almost a year and a half now, we would like a setting as soon as possible.
On February 11, 2016, Judge John J. Romero of the New Mexico Children's Court delivered a momentous ruling. Based on mental health evaluations, he deemed Nehemiah amenable to treatment and sentenced him as a juvenile. This decision meant that Nehemiah, then 18 years old, would likely be released from a youth detention facility when he turned 21. However, Bernalillo County District Attorney Kari Brandenburg announced her intention to appeal the ruling, igniting a fierce legal battle. The shocking events of that tragic night and the subsequent legal developments surrounding Nehemiah Griego's case serve as a chilling reminder of the devastating consequences of violence within the family unit.
I am sorry for taking our parents and our kids. You know, I wish I could take it back, but the reality is that we can't.
The legal proceedings surrounding Nehemiah Griego's case were fraught with complexity and controversy. As a minor at the time of the crime, the question of how to appropriately sentence him weighed heavily on the court's shoulders. While minors charged with first-degree murder are typically tried as adults in New Mexico, they cannot be sentenced to death or life without parole. However, in August 2019, a significant turn of events occurred. Judge Elisa Hart filed a 75-page order in the 2nd Judicial District Court, reversing the lower court's decision. She found that, at age 22, Nehemiah was not amenable to treatment or rehabilitation in available facilities. Judge Hart believed that he should be sentenced as an adult, given the severity of his crimes and the multiple victims involved. This was what he had to say to the judge during the sentencing.
Even the worst of us can make progress. Even the ones who've been through hell and back can still make it.
The decision to sentence Nehemiah as an adult carried significant implications. He now faced a potential sentence of up to 120 years in prison, a stark contrast to the possibility of release at age 21. The court recognized the magnitude of the crimes committed and the need for accountability. Nehemiah's public defender acknowledged the possibility of a lesser sentence and continued treatment for his underlying issues. The details of these discussions remain confidential due to Nehemiah's status as a minor at the time of the crimes. Ultimately, Nehemiah Griego received 3 concurrent life sentences plus an additional 7 years to run consecutively. He was given credit for the 2,476 days, equivalent to 6 years and 285 days, that he had already served. Nehemiah must serve a minimum of 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome courtroom videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.